takes more than being online to be a great online university. It takes time and experience. University of New England pioneered distance education in the 1950s and has been perfecting it ever since. With features like 24/7 tutor access, we're now rated #1 for teaching quality and support, and the only public university in Australia to receive a 5-star rating 14 years running. So, for an expert online education, choose UNE.
Thank you, Mario, for agreeing to be interviewed today for Law 499. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Mario Rashid, and I'm an associate at Coleman Gregg Lawyers. I work in their litigation and dispute resolution team. I've been with Coleman Gregg for about 8 years now, and as part of my role, I'm also involved in the technology and innovation squad within the firm.
Thanks, Mario. And we should also, for disclosure to our students, say that I'm also a consultant at Coleman Gregg, and I also am part of that tech squad committee, so that hence some of my information on technology. So thank you very much for your time today. Let me ask you the first question, which is, what do you see as some of the crucial issues with developments and innovations in new technologies?
Sure. So I think it's fairly clear to everyone now that across the board, there are a myriad of new technologies and software that's being implemented and used in different ways. What has happened as a result of the adoption of these technologies is very discrete and new, sort of novel legal issues are appearing. One of the biggest challenges is not only dealing with those issues as they appear, but also trying to preempt what those issues could be and advising our clients about those respectively, so that we don't run into a situation where a client is dealing with these new issues without having contemplated that they could arise. So that, in my view, is one of the biggest issues and challenges that lawyers and their clients are facing in the current climate.
Thanks, Mario. Could you expand a little bit more on that and give some specific examples of some of those legal issues, and particularly around topics like big data or artificial intelligence or social media or any other sort of technology issues that clients have brought to you that you've had to work through?
Sure. So one of the issues that I'm seeing more and more is the impact of social media and how effective that can be. For instance, I've acted in matters where businesses have been affected by comments and negative reviews that have been left by customers or clients. A lot of the time, those reviews can be fake reviews or unmeritorious, but nonetheless, they are still serious issues that a genuine business is left dealing with. Historically, there hasn't been a whole lot of scope within the legal system itself to deal with these types of discrete issues, because one, the process, the legal process for trying to get those type of reviews removed is very complex and it can be very expensive. And equally, it places a lot of strain on the company that's trying to manage these negative reviews, if they are indeed fake reviews. So one of the ways we've tried to deal with these issues in a cost-effective way is, in the first instance, trying to deal directly with the customer and making sure that the client's social media department and marketing departments are across everything that's going up. And if they're able to, resolve it with the customer in the first instance. But if that's not possible, then one of the effective tools that we've found has been to actually review the policies and the terms and conditions of the website which the review is being posted in. Because often what you will find is, if you undertake a close review of those policies, a lot of these reviews can actually be in breach of those terms and conditions. So that gives the customer a little more scope to try and resolve these issues, which can involve dealing directly with that third-party website, flagging this as an issue and seeking that they remove it independently. What often happens is that can be a sort of a novel way of dealing with these issues, because you're not going through the traditional court process. You're not spending a whole lot of money dealing with it, but ultimately, if you're successful, you find that these reviews are removed fairly quickly and at a fairly low cost compared with the traditional legal model of seeking injunctive relief. So that's one example of how technology and how technology has created issues, but can equally be used to try to resolve these issues.
Yes, I guess we've been seeing the courts using video conferencing and teleconferencing a lot more, and I think we'll probably see a lot more online dispute resolution in the future. I'm aware that you've actually dealt with some drone cases. Could you illustrate those for our students?
Sure. So the drones have been a big area in the law recently. There's been a lot of talk about it, but it's the use of it has equally created its own issues, and drones are again one of those areas of the law which generated a lot of talk initially about what these impacts could be, but in practice the impact's probably been a little bit different. One of the issues that we have been dealing with was a company in effect was using these drones to take photographs of different properties, and of course the parties whose properties had been photographed were outraged by it, because in their view it was an invasion of privacy, and there was a whole lot of other issues and other reasons why they didn't want this happening. And because it was a fairly new area, we had to spend a little bit of time considering what exactly the legal recourse would be for something like this, and whether it in fact was something that was inappropriate and shouldn't be done. So after having a look at what the law said and what the case has said about this particular issue, it was actually that the answer was a little bit surprising, because it seemed to be, in this particular instance at least, that there was a scope for this company to take photographs using drones. However, they had to draw the line if the photographs were of people doing something that they would ordinarily do in private, or otherwise would be inappropriate to be photographed. So the answer was a little bit surprising there, because initially when we heard about the situation, we thought that there was no way this could be allowed, but actually there was scope for that activity to take place.
That is interesting. In fact, I spent some time at the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg in 2017, and one of the matters in front of that court was actually where a drone was used for an inspection of property, where a farmer had received a subsidy to dig up a certain type of vineyard, sort of wine plants, to replant something else as part of a sort of European farming subsidy. And the drone was used to see whether that was actually happening. And all the arguments you just said were put forward, and in fact, it was stated there was not a breach of those privacy provisions, that they were able to do it because as a human, they could go within so many meters of the farmhouse. There was a restriction there, but the actual fields themselves, which had this major wall around them, medieval wall, they were able to do this inspection to verify whether these payments should be made. So you're right, it's an ongoing global issue. Let me draw your attention to one last matter. I know you've done some work around e-signatures and forgeries there, and supplies to customers where bank details are changed. Can you expand a little bit more on the laws relating to those?
Absolutely. So there's been a couple instances where this has come to our attention. In one instance, what had happened was there was a client who had sold a product to a particular party. The transaction happened online. That is, they viewed the product online, then they called the client directly to purchase it using a credit card. The client was then provided with a scanned copy of the customer's license and credit card, and then proceeded to debit that credit card in respect of the purchase of the product. So that all went through. There were no issues there. And then the product was released to the client. The client picked it up. And we learned a few weeks later that our client received a notification from their bank that the credit card used for the transaction had actually reported that transaction as being a fraudulent transaction. Subsequently, our client had the sales proceeds withdrawn from its bank account and remitted back to the cardholder. That left the client in an unusual situation in that it did not have the sales proceeds, nor did it have the benefit of the product that now had passed on to that third party. So it created a whole host of issues for the client, because what traditionally would have been a face-to-face sale had now taken place via the telephone and via email. So ultimately, the matter was able to be resolved, but the underlying issue was that the client hadn't put in place procedures to adequately screen and deal with fraudsters, which in the age of the internet and with some of the recent technologies that have been implemented, is a huge issue. There's a lot of scope for fraud. So before we get to the legal proceedings, it's always best for clients to take steps to protect themselves from these fraudsters. Equally, I had another client who had an issue with e-signatures, in that their signature had been entered into an electronic document without their authority or approval by one party, and subsequently 6 months later the other party to the contract tried to enforce the contract against our client, and that was the first time that our client actually knew of the existence of this agreement. And the difficulty with these e-signatures is it becomes a difficult process to try and prove that you didn't actually sign it, because these e-signature platforms have what they call verification steps and steps to authenticate that it is in fact the real person who's signing off on things, which in this case were circumvented fairly easily, which left our client in a fairly undesirable position. So in defending those proceedings, the onus then shifted to the client to try and justify why it said that this contract was entered into fraudulently, and that involves the engagement of a specialist forensic IT firm to provide the data to support that they could not have entered into that agreement, and that the relevant IP addresses didn't match up. And again, it is fairly telling in the sense that whilst there is a remedy and a recourse available to the client, had steps been put in place beforehand, some of these issues could have been avoided entirely.
Yeah, indeed. Great. Another example of the importance of cybersecurity and why employees and management and IT all need to work together to prevent such things from happening. Absolutely. Got about 2 minutes left. Do you want to give some comments on the next 5 to 10 years? What do you see as the sort of big legal issues in technology that are like to be on the horizon?
Sure. One of the major issues that I see is the use of artificial intelligence and how that can be adopted. Firstly, one of the key issues will be figuring out how to best utilize those resources and technologies to assist with some of the tasks that we're carrying out on a daily basis. But equally, and I think the more challenging aspect of the introduction of artificial intelligence is questions to do with liability and who will be and ultimately who will be responsible for the actions or advice or whatever that is provided by those artificial technologies. And the answer to those questions isn't clear cut, and I anticipate that that's something that's going to involve a lot of work and consideration moving forward.
Yeah. Mario, thank you very much for your time today. Really much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.